All right, everyone ready here? In relationship to using a radius top on the guitars, a lot of builders are going to that now. And some of the advantages of the radius top are it adds stiffness. When you build that top in a dome, you can make it lighter because the dome adds strength and stiffness. So you can use a thinner top. Of course, that makes the guitar more resonant. Another advantage is being a dome, it resists the temptation to cave in due to lack of humidity. If you've seen Martin's, old Martin's, the braces, the top potato chips in due to lack of humidity. Center seam comes apart, they split, they crack. All right, so when you build it into this dome, it's resistant to that effect. I'm not saying you don't have to humidify your acoustic guitars. Everyone knows you got to keep these at 50%. But not everyone is aware of that, and not everyone is as on top of it as they should be.
Are you radiusing the entire top, Mike?
Yes, sir. And the sides.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're going to use the entire rim.
Yes, the entire rim gets radiused to match the bracing of the top, and I'll get into that. It also, because it's a dome, it resists the deflection of the bridge to roll forward, or that bellying up behind, or the caving in front of the bridge. You see that all the time on acoustic guitars where the bridge rolls up. Because it's in a dome, you place the high point of the arch right in front of the bridge. Of course, that's exaggerated. Here's your high point. If your bridge is here, it's uphill here. It really resists that temptation to dive in here. It also resists the propensity for a neck set in the future. This is a nightmare if you're a guitar builder. You sold the guitar, but that guitar is yours forever. If he comes back and it needs a neck set, that's probably on you. You know what I mean? It's an expensive proposition, and it's a pain in the balls to do. Excuse me. So you want to build these instruments so that you don't have this problem. All right? So this part here is what we're going to get into, the relationship of the angle of the neck to the height of the bridge. The objectives we're trying to meet here is have a smooth and straight transition where the neck joins the body in a perfectly smooth line. Let me do this so that it's a little... The neck joins the body. We don't have a fall away. You know, a couple thousandths of inch of fall away is good. If you've got a 1/16 of an inch of fall away, that's unacceptable. If I buy a guitar from you, it's a cutaway, but then as I get to the cutaway, the tongue falls away. What's the point of having a cutaway? Because the action's gotten all high there. What's the point? This has to be a straight, perfect transition. If it rises, which is a misnomer by the way, this doesn't rise, the neck pitches this way. You're going to have that kind of look as you sight down the neck and you see this rise up. Obviously, I can't get my action low here at the 12th fret if that tongue is rising up. Smooth, straight transition that remains strong over time. Another objective we're after is how high is the bridge going to be? 5/16 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch I found is ideal. If you're less than 5/16, quarter inch, I mean, how many guys have run into this? You set it, and yeah, you're shaving off the bridge, trying to get the action down. If you're at a quarter inch or less, you're going to lose volume. You're losing drive on the top because the strings will not deflect this top as they should because you lost leverage. If your bridge is above 3/8, you're starting to get into that 1/2 inch range. Now you've got so much mass here, the strings are not accentuating the top as it should be. So we're after that happy medium where the strings deflect the top and drive it, but you don't have so much mass that it's damping it too. You want to build this light as you can, and still withstand 185 pounds of tension. That's the whole trick. It's the art of building guitars. Build this thing as light as you can and still withstand 185 pounds of tension, and have it 5 years down the road still withstanding it. You know, if I sell it to you, the action's great out the door, but you come back to me in 5 years and the action's, you know, 1/4 of an inch off the neck, not really acceptable. You also want the right amount of saddle height here. So if you're at 5/16 to 3/8, you shoot for 11/30 seconds right down the middle and still have 90 thousandths of saddle. That's also driving the top. If you have 90 thousandths to 1/8 of an inch of saddle, that's considered ideal. You start to get less than that, you lose this angle, the break angle exactly. You lose that angle. If it's too low, it's basically flat over there. The strings buzz because you don't have that break angle. You also lose volume and tone because it's not driving this top the way it should. So you're shooting for 11/30 seconds of bridge and 90 thousandths or 3/30 seconds of saddle. That's a perfect combination of height. All right? So making all this add up is the trick. There will be no singing along. All right. Okay? No yodeling.
No yodeling?
Oh my God, okay.
My brother, ring.
If you feel the need, go ahead and jump in. All right, now also, if you end up where this is too high, I mean, we see this on guitars all the time, you know, you've got 1/4 of an inch of saddle sticking out there because this angle's too low, or I mean, you've overset the neck where this is like this. Now I've got to raise things up here. Over time, that bridge will break. It's too much forward pressure, the saddle rolls over. Especially guys building the vintage style instruments where the saddle goes completely through the bridge, the old style Martins. There's no strength on the sides, and you've got a saddle that's a mile high. It's going to break every time. So the question is, what's going to yield this type of geometry and how do you achieve it? What I do is I radius the sides. Of course, we all radius the back. 16 foot is standard for Martin, I think, 15. Guys are doing different things. But I also radius the top. Now, when I say that, I take what I mean by that is my sides are in a mold, and I use a radius dish. This is not flat. Martin did this for years. They would glue 28-foot braces on the top and then glue that assembly to a flat rim. All right? It's disaster in the long run. All right? If potato chips in here, when the guy isn't humidifying it, if he's not right on top of it, Martins are really susceptible to needing neck sets down the road. They make a great guitar, but I can't afford to have these guitars come back to me. And I can't afford to do costly repair work on the guitars I'm building. So it's a lot better to make sure this thing's going to hold up. It's not a matter of overbuilding the guitar to overcome this problem. It's just a matter of the simple physics and geometry. You can actually build the guitar lighter because it adds so much strength at the top. So they used to build it, in the old days, this was at 90 degrees. It yielded no saddle height. Now they're at 1.5 degrees, but there's still problems down the road with it because there's no real structure back here that's long-term strong. .28-foot radius is what Martin uses on their braces. If you radius this at 28 inches, it's going to be too tall here. You're going to be over. If I lay a straight edge right along this line, I want a gap of 90 thousandths right there, right at the bridge position. That's ideal. If you make yourself a straight edge and you glue a 90 thousandths block right here on the end, you set that block in this position. That's what should happen. You've got about 3 inches right here where the tongue meets the body. This 90 thousandths should line up right with that. If I lay a straight edge right there and measure down here, 90 thousandths is perfect. 1/8 of an inch is a little high. 1/16 of an inch you can get away with. But that works out ideally every time. Every time. If I'm resetting a neck on a Martin, that's what I do. Set this to 90 thousandths. It's inevitably going to end up with some fall here because the body geometry isn't right. The body geometry is flat. So now my tongue looks like this. I'm exaggerating. But from here to here is what you're changing, this angle, where you remove it from the heel. Frank Finocchio and I have experimented with this round and round. 28's too much, 30's not, 30's too much. 32 inches we're getting away with. 32 foot radius. My next radius form will be 34 feet. So I make my braces a 34-foot radius. I radius the sides of the top in a 34-foot radius, being careful to keep the high point just in front of the bridge. And it yields perfect results every time. The next step of this is to fret the guitar after the neck is on. I fought this for years because it just seemed like it was a matter of being easy. Now, if I'm Martin Guitar and I'm making 70,000 guitars a year, there's an advantage to doing this, calling the frets in before it goes on. But I'm making 4 or 5 guitars a year. I can afford to spend an extra hour to make this perfect. And that's what we want. We don't want to build, well, I don't want to build Martins. I know at this point I can build a better guitar. I can build a guitar that's going to hold up over time. I think they sound better. I know they play better. I've had a lot of positive reinforcements from people who play. I'm not saying Martin makes a bad guitar. I'm just saying I don't have to make 70,000 guitars a year. And my goal is to improve it, to make it better. So if you're with that mindset, how can I make this better? Martin makes 70,000. Why do you want to make 70,005? Doesn't make any sense. You need to put your own signature on these. Make a better guitar. And this is kind of the state of the art at this point. To build this radius, I use a 34-foot radius.
No. Question.
Yes, sir.
34 foot is flatter than a 28 foot,
Yes.
so it's less arch than a 28.
Yes.
And to get your 90 thousandths, do you change that 1.5 degree angle on the next set initially?
No.
Or you just maintain that?
This radius gives you the angle. Gives you this angle. It's between 1.5 and 1 3/4 degrees. If you use a 28-foot radius on the sides, you're going to end up with more than 90 thousandths here. You're going to have to put a thicker bridge on
Why would you end up with more?
because the radius is more. There's my neck now. As this radius increases, or the 34, this becomes flatter. Okay? The less the radius, the more acute the angle.
Correct.
Okay? So at 28, you're over 1/8 of an inch here. When you lay that straight edge right on this body joint, right there, you lay it on the 3 inches or so what your tongue is to the sound hole, from the top of the guitar to the sound hole, you lay that straight edge on there, you come down here to the bridge location, you want 90 thousandths of an inch. If it's a little less, it's okay. A 16th of an inch minimum.
How does your radius relate to the angle of the presented to the neck by the block then? If you would draw the block in
In
these
here.
pictures,
Right. Okay.
And then your more abrupt radius, and then your less, 34 radius.
Everything's
relative-
radiused at 34 inches. My braces on the inside of the top, my sides. Sometimes I'll leave this neck block just a little proud so that when I sand it away, I have a smooth transition here. This is pretty much 90 degrees. It's hard for you to see, I'm sure. But that straight edge is actually this, as it sits now, it's out of the form, obviously. It's actually below the sides. So if I set a neck on here, my angle's like this. And then my strings are coming down here, and the neck is like that. The action's impossible. This has to be angled back. And a 1.5 degrees is typical. On a Martin, it also falls into this, about a 1.5 degrees, 1 3/4 of an inch. But having this transition from here to your sound hole in a straight line at the angle that's required to give you the 90 thousandths here is the whole trick. You look down the neck, you know, the tongue's not falling away, the tongue's not rising. It's a smooth transition. The action does not change once you hit the body.
So that 90 thousandths you're talking about, that measures to the top of the bridge or the top of the top?
That's from the top of the top,
Okay.
okay, to the bottom of this straight edge.
Straight edge, okay. I just
Okay.
want to make sure where you're actually measuring.
You're talking about the neck plane without the fingerboard.
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
Without the
Now it makes
fingerboard.
sense. Now
So if you add a 1/4 inch fingerboard,
Right, okay.
it starts to add up. If you have a 16th of an inch here, it's a 5/16 bridge.
So I was thinking, man, your bridges must rotate an awful lot more.
If you have 90 thousandths, it's a perfect 11/32 bridge.
All right.
It should come right to the top of the bridge with the fingerboard on with no frets. With no frets, okay? I'm using a 1/4 inch thick fingerboard in the middle, okay? So when I lay that whole assembly, 1/4 inch thick plus 90 thousandths, it comes to 11/32. That straight edge sits right on top of the bridge There is no gap as I sight down here. It works perfectly every time. Now, if the guy says, I want 1/16 of an inch action, I'm a fingerstyle player, I'm not going to hammer it. Now I have the opportunity, I can either take this saddle down to nothing, which isn't really what you want to do because you're losing driving force of the top, you're losing tone. But I can put a 5/16 inch bridge on here now. I'm a 32nd of an inch below the plane. I still have plenty of saddle, and yet my action is still 1/16 of an inch. As I was saying before, the whole trick, not the whole trick, I found it impossible to glue these necks on, threaded already, and have this transition come out dead on the money every time. Just the forces of gluing it, there would always be something. The tongue would rise up, the tongue would fall away. It was never right on the money. I couldn't repeat it. Time after time after time, it was always something. Eventually, I just came to the conclusion that I could glue this on and true that fingerboard up. This whole transition, any deflection in there, I could sand it out using my radius blocks and straight edges. I have 1x2 aluminum square tubing, rectangular tubing, sandpaper on it. Perfect for truing these up. I true them up on a granite block first. If you guys don't have a granite block, it's a great investment for truing up your straight edges, making sure your tools are true.
Like a surface plate.
It's a granite plate that machinists use.
That's what
It's a surface plate. It's a wonderful tool to have.
So shipping usually costs more than the plate.
Yes. And it's really helpful if your wife moves it for you.
I heard that.
Because they, in fact, I was talking to some guy, he spilled, he bought a quart of super glue and he set it on top and it spilled over. His surface plate is now permanently glued to his workbench.
Okay.
So that makes it even heavier. Yes, Scott.
How do you get the radius in the top?
The top plate,
Yes.
I radius all my braces to this 34 inches.
Okay.
All right? You glue it on
34 feet.
34 feet. I'm sorry. 34-foot radius. I glue those braces on. Then, when I glue that top assembly to this rim, it forms a perfect dome.
But
If I glue a radius top to a flat, you're forcing it out of what it wants to be.
So Mike, you don't put a flat on the rim assembly. You leave the rim assembly perfectly 34-foot domed all the way?
Yes,
And then?
yes.
So you don't flatten off that section?
No.
Right at the
After you
top?
glue the top on, if you've got to go zip, zip, zip with a block and a sandpaper, that's all it takes. If you lay this straight edge on a 34-foot radius, you have to really look to see any kind of... I mean, you could take a block and go, and it's done.
I think the same is true for almost anything outside of 25 feet up.
The difference
There's very
between...
little to flatten spot.
Yeah. The difference between the 28-foot and the 34-foot is a 32nd of an inch. Okay? It's not dramatic. So if you want to add a little more to you could get away with a 28.
Now, something else, though, where you position the center of your dome will raise or lower your bridge.
Yes, that's true. And I like to have the center of the dome right in front of the bridge because it adds strength there. You're resisting the rolling forward of the bridge because it's actually climbing up the hill of the radius. If I have this on the downward side of that slope, the tendency to drop in is greater. Yes,
But with the top piece, are you actually starting with a flat?
yeah, it's a flat plate through your thickness sander.
And then as you glue the braces on, you're actually forming the dome in
Yes.
the top. Okay.
So you're not using a concave radius thing?
If you're using a Go Bar deck,
Then you use that.
So,
same thing. That probably helps to maintain it. I don't personally use one. As soon as you take it out of there, it's going to want to flatten out.
so
So if you start with 34, that's not what it's going to stay at.
Nope.
It's not what it's going to stay at, because the tendency is for that top to flatten back out.
so you actually want to go,
No. After it all flattens out, this is what I want to start with. I'm talking, these measurements are all taken after it's assembled and it's a box. Okay?
Have you ever checked the amount of change that you've found?
I haven't.
It's not
And I think it's
curiosity.
I think it completely depends on what you're using.
Yeah, it's probably negligible as well.
It depends on what you're using. My rule of thumb is use the lightest and stiffest top you have. A light and stiff Engelmann top will sound better than a heavy or floppy Adirondack top. A light and stiff Sitka top will sound better than a heavy or floppy any species. It's a fact. If it's light and still stiff, stiff like your wedding night,
Deflection test
then
is
we're
a
good to
much
go.
better way of telling what your wood is than the
good to go.
species.
When you hold it in your hand, I meant to bring it. I bought this beautiful Italian alpine spruce top from Martin. It was $80. I thought, this is beautiful, not a speck on it. White, silky, beautiful. I got it home after years and learning. I could pretty much roll the edges up to where my thumbs were. Okay? That top is now diamonds that I use to repair cracks. It's worthless for a guitar top. It's an $80 bag of diamonds that I use to repair cracks because it's just too floppy. It's not worth, at this point, putting a bad top on your guitar. I don't care how nice it looks. The guitar's got to play great and it's got to sound great. And then it's got to look great. If you swing and miss on any one of those items, your guitar goes back on the rack when the guy picks it up. Looks good, feels good, sounds good. Maybe he'll drop the $3,000. You know, that's a whole nother story. You know, people dropping $3,000 on a custom-made guitar are few and far between. So it's really, I find it really important to be better than the average guitar that's out there.
Is the neck angle of 1.5 degrees the constant in this? Or did you try varying that to see if that made a difference? Because I guess that would move your sound hole then.
Well, that's not going to change your sound hole, but it's going to change the angle at which this is. You know what I mean? If I change it, this is either going to drop or go up.
So then you'll have a lower degree radius.
I don't pre-do all my necks at a degree and a half because I fit them after the fact to what's there. I know that if I lay my straight edge on there, come down here, it's at 90 thousandths, I just make the neck angle fit. So without the fingerboard, the neck's on, this transitions from here to here in a smooth line without any gaps or fall away. And I know it's going to be right on the money. It works every time. It's repeatable with good results every time.
Well, that's the key in any process, repeatability.
Is to repeat it. How did I do that? This works every time. If you have, now if I, as I was saying before, if I do a neck set on a guitar, let's say a Martin comes in. I keep saying Martin because that's kind of what I specialize in repairing. All right? This top is flat. When I lay my straight edge on here, there is no gap here. Or worse yet, it would be under there. Because this 15 years of 185 pounds of tension have pulled this way. This is all deflected. It didn't stand up to the test of time, okay? It's not the neck block that fails. The neck is always firm and glued to the body. That joint has not failed. It's not the dovetail that's failing here. It's the supporting structure of the back and the top. It's not the bolt-on that, oh, it's a bolt-on. It's not that that's failing. This joint remains tight. But as you look at the neck is sticking out like that. Of course, I'm exaggerating.
If I can interject here, what's happened with the flat top, you're having a couple of forces, the rotation of the bridge doing this.
Yeah, you got a hump back here, and in front, it's doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you got a couple of forces.
Probably most appropriate to say that the body has warped, because
Is-
it's all
yeah.
the fins have warped,
That's
not
exactly
the
what
neck
happens,
and the block.
the body actually will deflect to the point where you can look at the sides of the guitar, and at the apex of the two bouts, you'll actually see one of them go out parallel to the other. The back gets longer, the top caves in, and the geometry.
Well, if that were true, you would see that this tongue actually fell away here from this force going down. But what it appears is that the tongue goes like that. So it's this giving way here, and maybe you have some stretching of the back here. I don't know exactly. I mean, these forces are obviously there. There's no doubt about that. You do have this belling and the caving in here. So what happens here when I go to reset this, this is flat. I find my bridge position. I put that 90 thousandths notch on my straight edge, and I set the neck to that angle. I keep putting the neck on. I lay my straight edge on there till this lines up with the neck, the top. 90 thousandths without a fingerboard. If a fingerboard's on, I'm going for 11/32 with a 1/4 inch fingerboard. You just add the thickness of your fingerboard in the center to this dimension. 90 thousandths plus the thickness of your fingerboard. Okay, 11/32.
Now, what do you do about the fretboard tongue? Do you fare the body away?
Do I, my tongue?
The
Here?
Or do you ship the tongue out to sound?
It depends. The Martin, if the fingerboard's bound, they want you to just leave it. So when you look down here, it appears to dive away.
Okay.
It appears to fall away.
Has to
If
be
it's
fall.
not bound, they like you to shim it. So it actually looks like it gets thicker.
Okay.
But you do have this smooth transition. A lot of guys just leave it alone. Because playing up over the body without a cutaway is,
Move.
yeah.
Right, you think it's
I'm not a repair guy.
The customer-
In order to do that
It's still perfect.
routine,
Yeah.
do you take the old neck and strip the fingerboard off it so that you got a flat surface to lay your straight edge on, or you just do the calculation?
No, I do the calculation. If the fingerboard,
You know it's a 1/4 inch
Sti-
plus the height of the.
yes. If I'm at 5/16 to 3/8 here, I know I'm going to be good to go. 11/32 is right in the middle. That's perfect.
Is that going to be the same number regardless of your scale?
This, I suppose if you're on something, I don't think it's going to matter.
I don't-
25/4 or 24/9.
I mean, if you're doing a parlor or something like that, where it's, like a 21-inch scale, 21 3/4, something like that?
Shouldn't matter.
No, it shouldn't matter.
And I'm
It's
using
gonna hold
similar
true.
numbers, 12 fret, 14 fret, long scale, short scale, it doesn't matter.
The important thing is to have,
One steel string.
to have this transition be smooth and end up with that dimension there. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the high part on the dome. Is that determined by the design of the X braces?
When I put this, no, I don't have this down to a CNC machine. I go like this in a radius form.
Right.
Okay? And my radius form has a hole in the center. So I can see where the center of that dish is. Okay? I keep my eye on the
That's
center.
your high point on the
I
center.
keep my eye on the center. I know where my bridge is, and I put that thing basically right there. Basically, it's lining up here with the waist of the guitar.
Presumably you do the same for the X brace, right? You position the X brace where it's supposed to be, but offset.
That kind of falls in, I mean, it pretty much falls in there because where your X is, that's pretty much where things change. Where I make the X. When I glue that assembly onto the rim is what matters, how I shift that thing around.
Well, I was referring to when you radius the X-brace. Presumably you glue it together before you put those radiuses in.
I radius them first.
You radius them first, then
Yeah.
glue them together?
Yep.
And you don't then bias it anymore beyond that?
No.
Okay.
I leave them thick so that I can scallop it the way I want to, or not scallop. A lot of guitars I don't. Bigger guitars I might choose not to scallop them. I get a lot more power and a lot more high end out of a big guitar by not scalloping not going crazy with it. You lose punch and lose clarity and definition if you go too nuts. So my thoughts are, don't go crazy with the scalloping.
I gotta agree with you. If making a top floppy was the secret, we'd be bracing paper by now.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, if you think about the stress on the top, you have compression forces from the saddle to the neck block. You have a rotational force from the neck block and the bridge, and then you have tensional force from the saddle to the tail block. Well, what carries load most efficiently? You can pull on a piece of wood, and you aren't going to break it. You can compress it, and it will deform. That's called the moment of gyration. So think about that when you're building your guitar, where you can make things light, where the load is carried efficiently, and where it isn't. Same thing you discovered. Sometimes stiffer is a hell of a lot better. I mean, I like scallop bracing, but I don't like the hard Martin scallops. I like more for an accent.
It's really a matter of what am I building and what do I need to enhance. If I've got a jumbo size guitar, a dreadnought, I'm not looking to enhance bottom end because it's already there. It's a huge guitar. I'm trying to enhance the treble at that point. On a smaller guitar, I'm trying to enhance the bottom end, and then the scalloping would come into play. So it's really a matter of what am I building and how do I want to address the deficiencies in the size or design of this guitar.
Once you've achieved your radius on top, do you do any how should I say, carving of the bridge plate underneath there to fit it? Or is that just...
I put the top in a radius form and then super glue my bridge plate on. And I always use Brazilian rosewood for my bridge plates.
Really?
Yeah. Just because my mind thinks that's going to help keep the curve, you know, does it really?
And you super glue it in?
Yeah, it's hard. It doesn't creep. It's not a rubberized latex layer between the ball ends of the string and your top. I think you could probably get the same effect with hide glue.
I use fish.
Hide glue dries to a crystalline, strong, I want to say brittle, but it's a strong glue that's worked well for centuries. So I think it helps to transmit tone. I don't use maple for my bridge plates. I use scrap pieces of Brazilian rosewood.
Have you ever tried Indian rosewood?
Yeah.
Do you hear a tone difference if you use
Absolutely, I do.
Same way with the glue.
You know, it's impossible to build two identical guitars. It's hard enough to build one guitar that's great. Now I got to build two and put two different bridge plates. I just think that, I mean, just by tapping on a thin piece of Brazilian and hearing ping, 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 and a piece of maple really doesn't do that.
Don't make for rimbas out of maple for a reason.
Yeah.
And East Indian rosewood, I think, has a lot more dampening than Brazilian.
Well, I built
I think
guitars,
that rosewood, either species, is probably better than maple.
and then two of them were maple, and I didn't have any maple, so I used rosewood. And I swear that is more mellow. And I'm just blaming it on it's a thicker plate too.
I use
Well,
sage on
that
it.
probably has more effect than the
Maybe
wood.
that's-
Considering some of us may never have access to Brazilian rosewood to use for these purposes, what would be your number two?
That's what I used up until the point where
Any domestic woods?
Well, anything,
Like maybe a locust or a hickory, which are
I
very
don't
hard
know.
and dense.
If you, I know that Paducah is very close in specific gravity to Brazilian rosewood. So that would probably be a good choice, and it's cheap.
And hickory has a lot of damping to it. It has an elastic quality. I work with a lot of
Light,
hickory.
stiff.
Yep.
What does it sound like when you go like that? Is it ringing, or does it go thud, thud, thud?
I think I would worry more in the beginning that your joinery is better than anything, but as far as bridge plates, I got to agree, you want something hard.
Hard, pingy?
ASC has a strength of materials chart where you can go and see what the different specific gravities and what the different weight relationships are to wood. You'll find Osage orange is also very good. Black locust is very good. But, you know, the domestic, so, because I played with them already, and I actually found them to be pretty decent, but unlike him, I like my Brazilian.
You know, there is no one magic bullet to this. It's a combination of little things that you're going to learn over time. And when you start, if I change my bridge plate, am I going to hear a difference? Probably not. But if I use my light stiff top and I use a Brazilian bridge plate and my joints are tight and my braces fit nice, I don't have glue schmooped all over, that's going to, all those things brought together, you know. Is it because grandma had a certain kind of cherry? No, it's the crust, and she sifted the flour, and you know, she melted the butter and sugar together first.
So then love.
All these things, and it's the same thing. You love to build a guitar, and you want it to be a great guitar.
Are you
Tasty.
tasting the thickness? You stay with the same thickness level?
On my tops,
No, on your bridge plates.
typically 100 thousandths. I use scraps from what I have, and I had a bunch of Brazilian that was split, and I couldn't do much else with it.
Using quarter or slab, riff.
Quarter is always better, but you take what you can get. The days of picking through Brazilian rosewood are long gone.
Still brings back to your question,
thinner.
which is, if you had to pick a domestic hardwood to use,
I really
What would
couldn't
be?
say. I mean, I guess maple would probably be the best bet at that point. Has worked for Martin for
Like I said,
how long?
locust, Osage orange, very hard. Hickory's very.
I don't
hickory's
have
very
any
dense.
experience with it.
Yeah,
I really couldn't say.
fair enough. Yeah.
I really couldn't say.
I know some people swear by walnut and Claro walnut over.
I've built some wonderful guitars out of walnut. I think walnut's going to be the next guitar making wood, especially for us here in the United States.
Grab it while you can, you know about the fungus that's being involved in it.
Yeah, there is a 1,000 canker disease that's attacking all the black walnuts on the East Coast. So
You know something funny about walnut? Anyone here know any high-end gunsmiths?
Yeah.
Talk to a high-end gunsmith. Ask him why those gun stocks are made out of walnut. You know what he's going to tell you? No wood absorbs and dissipates recoil better than walnut.
well, I don't know anything about making guns.
But I think it's counterproductive to make musical instruments where you want vibrations to ring on, to use wood with a high damping factor.
Well, a gun stock is, 2 inches thick.
I know a fellow up in North Jersey who collects guitars. He has over 100 of them. And you know what his favorite guitar, all of them is in the acoustic range? It's a Taylor made out of walnut.
Yeah.
He says it has the finest sound of any guitar in his
Now, is
entire
that one of the
collection.
Liberation Tree, or remember they did that,
Yeah.
the Freedom
He
Tree?
even had some of that stuff in his collection, but this one was just a rather plain Taylor. It was a nice Taylor.
I think
it was
you're,
like an L22.
you've got a good point.
But walnut
We
was.
obsess over the woods, and oh my God, it's your first, we want to make a D45 right out of the box. It's not the pearl, it's not the fact that I have Brazilian rosewood, it's what you do with it. It's your hands, yeah. It's the fineness of your joinery, it's the fineness of your quality of work. It's paying attention to details. It's like, okay, I'm looking down the neck, and you're, God, I hope he doesn't see that. You know, you need to take a really good look at your own instruments and ask yourself, how can I improve this? How can I make this a better instrument? And then once you see where you're having problems, I mean, this fitting of the neck is not easy. I'm not trying to say this is easy. This is just the geometry that works for me. The playability of the instrument is completely dependent on this. If this part isn't right, it's just up to the wind whether your playability is going to be right. You may have gotten lucky somewhere along the line, but to get your action playable repeatably, this works for me. But it's the quality of your work. It doesn't matter if your guitar is walnut or Brazilian rosewood. A crappily made Brazilian guitar is not going to sound as good as a walnut guitar that's made well.
The palette guitars. Yeah.
Perfect example. The guy who was in here, Tallarico, kicked my fenders in, that son of a gun. He gave Martin oak to make guitars out of. I actually had the opportunity to play one. It sounded fine. Not a bad guitar at all. I think we tend to obsess over what we're building it out of. And it's not as much what you build it out of, but what you do with what you have.
Don't let tradition block you in.
That's it. Yes, sir.
In the, I think 30s and 40s, Epiphone built some of their art stops using walnut. And like the 30s Epiphone Broadway, with walnut sides and back. And they actually sounded quite fantastic.
But I would have to echo your point. You know, there's so many different variables that go into what makes an instrument sound great. And many of them are underrated in terms of their importance. And putting it all together into a package, for whatever reason, all of those various interplaying components come together, then the instrument will sound good. If they don't come together right, it won't sound good. Simple as that.
I think the overall tendency is to build things too heavy. If you pick up a guitar and it feels heavy, it probably isn't going to sound as good as it could. Now, if I'm building thousands of guitars a year, it might be to my advantage to build it heavy because it doesn't come back. You know, down the road, it might hold up structurally better. Not true. It's going to hold up to abuse better. You want things to, you know, when I take that top out of the thickness sander, I'm letting it float down in my hand. I'm flexing it. Can I take a little more? Gets to a point where, yeah, it's stiff, but it feels like a parachute falling into your fingers. It's not going clunk, clunk, clunk. So that's the key, to build it as light as you can and still withstand 185 pounds of tension. That's the beauty. It's a perfect blend of art and engineering. And that's why I love building guitars.
It's nice that all your forces are directional too. So you only have to worry about, for the most part, tension this way. You get some this way, but
Yeah, it is. You're right. You're right. But still, it's a full-grown man standing on the headstock of your guitar. I mean, you think about it that way. You want a full-grown man standing on there and still have this thing sing. It's a challenge. And I think that's why we're all here, because we enjoy that challenge.
Raise the bridge.
So what?
Before I glue it on, yes, sir. Absolutely. I have a positive form that I say at the radius. He asked if I radius the bridge before I glue it to the top. Yes, absolutely.
You use a form, you have to put a piece of sandpaper on,
I have sandpaper self-stick on a radiused block.
And that would be easy enough to make using the dish.
That's exactly how I do it.
Yeah, you just make a positive out of the negative.
I get my wife down and I say, do that for a while.
Should kick your ass.
She doesn't need an excuse, believe me.
I guess another thing to think about while you're trying to achieve your 16th or 32nds there, you're removing some material off the cheek of the neck.
Off the
You gotta
heel,
you often have to make sure that you're not losing your positioning so that you lose your.
side to
center
side,
line down,
yeah.
Side to side.
That's a whole nother lecture.
Yeah. And when you start, I think most
That,
people,
it's the most difficult thing
Yeah.
of the whole guitar process, is fitting this neck. Not only are we concerned, I mean, I'm only talking about the angle this way. This way, side to side. I mean, if your string's hanging off the base side of the neck, well, that's obviously not going
But
to
you
be
can,
a
you can achieve your 16th or 32nd and just lose your center line if you're not careful quite easily.
Well, you have to pay attention to that. The point I'm making here is to have this transition be a straight line from the body joint to the sound hole. Have that fingerboard, when you sight down it, it's a perfectly straight line. It doesn't fall away once it joins the body, and worse yet, it doesn't raise up. And have it transition so that you have this gap here, 90 thousandths. Or with the bridge on, 11/32. Side to side, that's a matter of fitting your neck properly. It's obviously got a center line down the center of the bridge.
you got to consider all of that as you're setting the neck. I mean, when I teach people, I say ACE. Angle, I think Mike will agree, that neck angle is critical so you can hit your 90. Center line, and as long as you can get that relationship, then you manipulate your dovetail to drop it to hit your body. But that, I think setting the angle first is critical. So don't,
That's where I start.
Yeah.
I start with the back angle first, and then I check to see how far off I got, and it is always off. It's always off. You have to go back and redo it. And then you have to check that again.
So sometimes you just got to keep going back and forth until you get that sweet spot, right?
Absolutely.
And accept the tolerance. You don't have to be dead nuts. If you're 16 to the tail, I think that's close enough realistically.
Yeah, and he means down here. If you're within a 16th down here, you're probably okay. I mean, obviously, if it's right dead nuts, then you're better. But a 16th of an inch here translates to, I don't know, probably 20 thousandths up there. I'm guessing. Any other questions?
Say, what you're trying to say is, you're reverse engineering from your point of your action line. As you said, you're looking for that 90 thousandths plane, let's call it the neck plane without the fingerboard,
Yes.
or the fingerboard plane to hit the top of the bridge. Or if you have the frets on, you want to be
A
just
32nd above the
Above
bridge
the
with
bridge.
the frets in.
with the frets in.
Yeah.
A lot of people, that's kind of hard for them to comprehend. Put your neck in, measure what you are right at the set, right there. And let's say you're an 1/8 inch high. Then you add, as he says, it's 90 thousandths to the 1/8. Now you know where you're heading. Whatever you have here right now, add the 90, that's your target at the point of the saddle, correct?
Yeah, but the thing is, if this isn't built right from the get-go, you're not going to
Yeah.
get that. The body has to be built with the right geometry first. If you don't have this angle, I suppose I could sand the angle in there and make that happen before it's all glued on. But if this is all glued up already, I really can't change that, and I'm at the mercy of it.
Well, you and I do things a little different, and this is one of the beauties of this, because not everybody does it the same way. That's why I asked you dome the whole top,
I dome the whole top.
and I don't.
And I think that is what gives me the maximum amount of strength, is that is a perfect dome.
Well, and from I have a lot of engineering background, so, and these are theories.
Do they
that-
let you blow the whistle?
Oh, no, not that. But what I do is I use a 28, but I don't radius the entire top, because as he said, if you entirely radius the 28 dome on the top, now you're gonna really shoot things crazy.
Not only that, but the only point of tangency is going to be right at the joint,
Right.
where the neck hits. That's the only place that your straight edge will touch the top.
If, however,
it's
you
going to rise
glue,
beyond that.
if you glue that radius top to a flat sides, there's a whole bunch of inherent problems that raise their head. It's the humidity that wants to dish in. You've built a form and now you're squashing it flat.
And you don't know how it's gonna form, because there's no control of the process.
Well, that raises a good question too. Do you do this? You do this not in a mold. You do this out in.
No, I do all the radiusing in a mold.
Oh, okay.
I glue my top and back on in the mold.
You only radius your.
Okay. What about the next setting? That
That's all
angle.
I radius, yeah.
That process.
That comes after the body is bound.
It's all done. It's out.
It's basically done.
Okay. So it's not being constrained. It's taken the set it's going to take already.
Yeah. As soon as I take it out of the mold, I lay that thing on there and see if it held.
If you glue a radius top on the flat, it'll hold the waist to pull it down to height.
You're opening yourself up. You're losing all the advantages of what I just talked about if you glue a radius top to a flat rim. I used to, and that's what I used to do. What I would do was put a block under here. I can't remember if it was a 1/2 inch. And then I would sand an angle from here to here till I got this 1.5 degree angle.
All the rest of the rim is flat.
All the rest of the rim is flat. I would true it up on a flat board and then sand in this angle. And it works. It doesn't hold up over time.
Well, among other things, your glue joint isn't going to be as strong because it's not wood against wood. It's wood in a big gap of glue.
This part here,
It would be filled.
it's
with glue.
imperceptible.
Yeah, you're talking
Yeah,
about.
It's
you're
imperceptible.
talking, I think that's not an argument that really works.
Yeah, it really is imperceptible. What I did notice was that the tendencies of the tops to react to lack of humidity, the tendency of the bridge to lift up, and you get that belly. How many guys have seen a Martin with a big belly behind the bridge, or a concave action in front, or both? You're looking at the bridge and it's sitting like this.
Yeah. Well, I'm agreeing with you. I think that you cannot.
Doesn't sound like it, darn it.
No. The top is.
He's agreeing in a German way.
I'm agreeing with you for the reasons that, part of the reason is if you left it flat, there would be a microscopic gap.
Yeah,
Where
but,
the top
well,
would be
that's,
sitting only at the very far edge of the rim.
And I think
there would
that's-
be glue between the
well,
rim
what
lining
happens
and the
is
top the rest of the
you
way.
compress the wood opposite
If
of
you
where
do
it's
that, then you're
at.
flattening it out, and it's no good.
It's true. And then what happens is the lack of humidity accentuates that.
Yeah.
And it potato chips in.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, the braces are breaking away.
Yeah.
And now things are really compounded because there are no braces attached at the top. So this was how I thought would be the best. It's not my idea. Other guys are doing this. But this seems like a good way to eliminate all these inherent problems. The question is, what radius do you use? And the guys use different things. I mean, you have Kevin Ryan putting a 9-foot radius on the back. I mean, the thing is like, holy, half a basketball
Look
back
at
there.
Loudon.
Pardon?
Look at Loudon.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're
yeah.
holes.
And everybody has their own idea as to what works best. This is what I think is going to work best for me.
This is a little off subject, but generally speaking, with an arch, what you're doing is you're distributing your loads evenly along the arch. With a larger arch, you have less loading per.
Usually, the more its radius, the stiffer it will be.
Yeah.
The idea is all pre-stressing. When you actually bend something in order to prepare it to apply a load, whether it's a floor.
What I know is that it does add stiffness, and I was really more concerned with what radius is going to give me this geometry. Like I said, the difference between 28 foot and 34, it's a little over a 32nd of an inch. So, and you know what? They're all minutely different. You know, I'm going like this, you know, with a radius for them. It's not, you know, maybe I'm dancing and a music's on. And
I drive a
so,
bus.
if it's within that, if it's within that 1/16 of an inch to 90 thousandths, it's going to be good.
And I think the point you're really trying to make,
Works for me. And as far as fretting here above the tongue, I have a little piece of steel block. It's probably 2 inches by 3 inches by 1.5 inches. I hold it in here under the tongue, and the frets go right in.
what size tang you use?
It really all depends what the frets. It really all depends what you're doing. It really all depends. Like Gibson's are 25 thousandths. Obviously, 20.5 is not going to work in there.
And you know, Martin's gonna probably be going with Rich Light, so,
With what?
Rich Light.
And who is he?
Rich Light, it's man-made material. Gibson just went with it.
It's like their phenolic fingerboard.
Yeah, and that's it. It's no longer like carbon.
That's a whole nother thing too.
That's another pain.
More and more guitars are now being made out of
Lambu.
plastic.
Lambu. Fender's latest creation.
Great job.
It's up to $2,000.
Thank you very much.